Hello, I'm Mark Baer. Welcome to the Joe Cupcake Chronicles. Today, Raw Deal, Part 3. And in this episode, we encounter Marcel Duchamp, the great Marcel Duchamp. He is the granddaddy of art. If Andy Warhol is the son, if Jeff Koons is the grandson, Marcel Duchamp. It's not about the thing, it's about the idea. Andy Warhol wasn't a genius because he painted a soup can. It was the idea of the soup can. Joe is also having a difficult time at work. His last idea, the cube room, had some issues. It was a big idea, but it didn't work out so well. And they're pressuring him as he moves up the corporate ladder. Joe, the man in the gray flannel suit, and he has to come up with his new idea. It's Christmas in July, and he has to have it ready for the Christmas season. He's up there, they're playing the music, it's rapping, it's hot outside, it's Christmas at the corporate office, and Joe has to come up with his new big idea. And what do you give the man who has everything is the question. The man who has everything doesn't need anything. He already has everything. But the man who has everything is the last man who can afford anything. So what do you give this guy? And Joe, who often misses work, is often tardy, is often off on his own, who tells them he's off thinking, is off walking his dog, and instead of doing his work, he's hanging out with his dog, communing with his dog, and he's always worried about his dog, and lately things hadn't been good with his doggy's diet, and things weren't a little squishy. And it got better, and he's out with his dog, and he talks, what do you give the man who has everything? And his dog tells him, and he says that his dog insists that he not be held to blame. Joe would have to take the blame for this, and the idea for the man who has everything was the golden dog turd. This was a little iffy proposition, but several years later, all the top brass had one on their desk, and not only did they like the imagery of it, they were worth 5 times more than what they paid for them. We should also give a shout out to the great Sam Fuller, whose Naked Kiss has always remained a great inspiration for Joe Cupcake. That opening scene when she's beating the guy over the head with her purse and smashes a bottle over his head. Then her wig comes off and she's totally bald. A nasty little piece of movie magic.
Joe wanted to invent a new radio, one that cut to the chase and got to the heart of the matter. That is to say, who was pulling the strings? Who was making the puppets dance? Who would buy this radio, this truth-telling machine? Well, what if it only told lies to cover up for the vested interests? Nah, the competition would be too stiff. Then Joe had an epiphany. He would save the company big on their news division. They'd start with the headlines. The Prez said today, and stocks today, the weather today, and the rest of the news would be reruns. A plane crash, kids in China getting chopped up, an insurgency bombing, a Hollywood divorce, a new diet. Who'd know? Lindsay Lohan plus some static. Let the listener fill in the blanks, or maybe forget the news and babble straight from the unconscious. Now may we present automatic writing exercise number 1. Zipper, ziggle, zim, Tom? Question mark. What? Question mark. Hot what? Huh? Can't hear you. Dog feet on floor, dog shakes, fire, crackle, crackle, a sound like cellophane ham? Question mark. Beware, beware. And then the dog, I am just the logs cracking. I am not talking to you. Why are you listening to me? Don't listen to me. I'm just the fire in the fireplace and a log rolls over. Listen carefully. God is not in your fireplace. God is not your dog spilled backwards. You are an idiot. Toot toot, beep beep, bad girls, talking about bad girls. And so we rise again, even as a vandal, with a crayon blackens our teeth. Click to, so racked the cracked spheres with the trumpets of their wrath, as this black hush hath rent the collapsing firmament. Click to Marcel Duchamp, Art Dolls for Adults. Champ or chump, didn't matter to him. Never needed to be popular, never needed to be understood, didn't understand himself. Why else would he build art gizmos no one could frame? The Big D traveled light, kept his one suit on a nail hooked on his wall. Surrealist battery-powered plastic doesn't matter. Duchamp don't need a receipt. Duchamp don't need a bag. Duchamp don't need a string to say things. Pulling the cord, he'll get bored. That's okay. Duchamp knows where your feelings are stored. Let your fingers do the walking. Let your fingers do the talking. Let them talk. Let them walk. Show you his mustache, maybe. Star bright, starlight. Wish upon a star tonight. Feed the hungry, heal the poor. Take a load off. Quarter under the pillow. 2 quarters, $5 a check. A gift certificate, never enough. A hummingbird fluttering in midair. Still as a heartbeat. Energy to spare. Marcel Duchamp would not say how much he paid for Bernie Madoff's underwear with the inscription, "Ha ha ha, I hope you rot." But he didn't bid on the monogrammed slippers. They went for $6,000, and they were a size 9. He bought a similar pair on eBay, size 11, for $100. To Marcel, real or fake, it didn't matter. The objet d'art should be a unique product of an artist's labor. And this was his PayPal account, damn it. Thank you for tuning in. All gibberish all the time. Be there or be square. Moon River, wider than a mile. Blub, blub, blub. Don't dig too deep. You cut through the crust of delusion at your own peril. Good delusion, getting things done. Bad delusion, thinking what you've done is important. The great delusion debate. What happens when you can no longer delude yourself? Joe woke up in the night and repeated out loud, "You are out of your mind. You are completely insane. You are delusional." Joe was good at irony, but ironing eluded him. Ironic or just wrinkled. Jug, 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 scribble, scribble, scribble. Bauhaus, Duchamp, Giacometti, Surrealism. Mr. Steamy, 1-800-590-2067. He'd seen it on TV, and it was supposed to iron his shirts in the dryer. If this worked, Mr. Steamy could change everything. Joe could see himself appearing in public with clean shoes and an ironed shirt. He looked down with an appraising eye. He hadn't changed clothes in the last 3 days, although he'd swapped out underwear just yesterday. Hygiene was a bear. He told his wife about Mr. Steamy, and she informed him that his new dryer could do the same thing. Yeah, sure, if you knew the right settings. That was the last thought he gave to being pressed. Later, watching TV in bed, Joe heard there may be feces in our hamburger. The conveyor line to kill the cows is so fast it can't be kept clean. In a single hamburger, there could be the meat of 100 different animals. Have it your way. Daisies and delicate bells, white, purple, and blue. Who is this Camus? And who is Camus to you? Spring and wild calla lilies. Reality seeped in on a drip line. Stop to smell the roses as we hurtle to oblivion, to drown in an ocean of dreams without a sound. The melodies of birds and bees. Moses lost in the wilderness. There are no accidents, or there are only accidents. Shadow Man. He felt best in the early morning and late afternoon when he could stretch. We rise, we fall, flat, splat. What is it about a song that can make you cry? It all became music to Joe. Ice in the ice maker. A table bumped in the dark. Joe rifled through piles of notes on his desk. Nothing made sense, so he changed the order. The idea is not to control the thoughts. Let the juxtaposition reveal new thoughts. Toss the dice, tea leaves, bones. Joe watched the series about the motorcycle gang. He rooted for them and all their bloody deeds, and it made sense why the pretty doctor fell in love with the homicidal outlaw. But then he dreamed they all moved into his house. That wasn't so good. In the morning, he told his wife. She said, "I'd love to hear all about it, but I'm late. Sorry." Nothing is sacred. Everything is sacred. Life felt no more real than a movie. The movie felt no more real than life. Too late, too early. You think your time has passed, but that is an illusion. There is time enough. Start now, says something deep, something soulful, something that touches the lost chord. That's what you want to do before your time is through. He might wish and never get it. The beauty and the loving in the world. This was the last line of John Galsworthy's The Forsyte Saga. In Joe's yellowing library book, someone had scrawled in pencil, "How very sad." And it was sad, but Joe was a sucker for the privileged Edwardian England of Galsworthy's world. And he could imagine himself as a member of a gentleman's club, maybe the Snooks Club or the Hodgepodge Club. His company would be a tad threadbare like himself, loud, rowdy, but the best of characters, an aristocracy based on merit, not on fetus bingo. "Ah, Lord Cupcake, may I take your coat?" Joe could feel the glow of the fire, the old leather chairs, and he could taste the fine port. And delighting in his friends, Joe gave voice, however imperfect, to their common ideal. "A gentleman should always stand when a lady enters the room. But more importantly, a gentleman always stands up for a friend. When a gentleman gives his word, he keeps his word. A gentleman considers the feelings of others before he considers his own. A gentleman knows how to listen, and he thinks before he speaks. A gentleman is humble. He allows his deeds to speak for themselves. A gentleman cultivates both style and substance. One without the other does not a charming fellow make. A gentleman makes up his own mind. He is not swayed by the mob. A gentleman is generous to a fault, especially when he can least afford it. A gentleman protects the weak and never takes the side of the bully. A gentleman knows how to keep a confidence. A gentleman knows to be interesting, he must be interested. This is the price of being allowed in the company of other gentlemen. A gentleman is mindful of his manners, but never ostentatious in their display. Manners should be humble and invisible. A gentleman explores as many facets of his personality as he can. He is never afraid of ridicule from the outside, or afraid of what he might discover about himself. To a gentleman, the greatest sin is to be boring to others, but more importantly, to himself. And a gentleman is never a snob, except about his tomatoes. Here, old Cupcake, what fine rot. But Joe lived in coarser times. Joe was walking with his comedian buddy when they stumbled upon a tarantula crawling down the road. "Your friend or mine?" asked Joe. The comedian didn't seem at home in the country. He was overweight, overdressed, and a smoker, and Joe was thinking if he was watching his friend on TV where he usually saw him, he wouldn't have to feed him. The comedian offered to help Joe weed his garden, but Joe said no and told his friend he was a house cat, not an outdoor cat. "You entertain," said Joe, "and I'll get dirty." The comedian brought up a big industry executive Joe only knew through the trades. Joe said, "I'm surprised he still talks to you. He's richer than God." "He has to talk to me. I was the one who got the 3 a.m. phone call to drive out to a house in Downey and rescue him from 2 hookers in a pile of blow. He's sprawled out. One of the hookers is working on his little pink willy that's been squeezed dry, and the other is squatted over his face. Joe said, "I saw him give a speech. He looked so respectable up on the lectern." "Amazing, huh?" said the comedian. "He's all cleaned up now, and he's got the new wife and the new life. But he's never sanctimonious with me. He knows I know. But don't ever mention this to anyone. It wouldn't be cool." "Not me," said Joe. "Who would I tell?" They gossiped some more about this incident, and the comedian told Joe how when he packed up the drugs and tried to leave, one of the hookers grabbed onto his ankle as he made his way to the door. "It was awful. Her wig fell off." Joe asked if she was bald, thinking Constance Towers in the opening scene of Naked Kiss, a nasty little slice of movie magic. The hooker wasn't bald, but they both agreed Sam Fuller was a genius. Then they talked about the charity event they had been to in Beverly Hills, how everyone they knew looked so respectable. "Maybe it's just middle age," said the comedian, "and Binky with the new baby and all." Binky, an artist, had called Joe just that morning. "Man, my tribe was always there for me when I was putting on a peyote sex magic ritual. But now, no one is around when I need a babysitter." Joe and the comedian talked about a lawyer they knew. She had been out of work for 3 years, and now she was spouting off about strange conspiracy theories. More and more friends were barely holding on. A 2-time Grammy winner couldn't pay her rent. Another's TV series had been canceled. "And this is Hollywood," said the comedian. "Imagine what reality is like." Joe was scared to pick up the phone. There was no call blocking the Greek chorus of the new normal. Joe wished he could send everyone a $100 bill in an unmarked envelope. He knew Ben Franklin was a balm for almost any malady, better than Xanax, but he could hardly manage the stamps. Joe, the entrepreneur, spoke up. "Maybe everybody needs $100 from a friend. Could he charge $102 for a $100 Be Happy gift card and include a few encouraging words like, 'This too shall pass' or 'Pass the vodka'?" He'd write a business plan. But later that night, he saw a similar card on TV. And not for $102. This one was for $105. He'd always said in a cheesy world, you need to build a bigger rat, but saying and doing, Joe was a babe in the woods. The billboard read, "Enjoy twice as fast. Evolve twice as fast. Lips, hips, eyes, thighs, crime, time, ticking time bombs of expectation. Robert Rauschenberg." Joe liked how it all meant something and at the same time meant nothing. Gold, gold, gold. When everything turns to shit, gold. In the Joe Times, they trotted out the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why, plus how much. The country was still fuming over the bailout blues. Enter the minister of sinister trying to toughen Joe up. Joe was being schooled like a kid in short pants. "We want more, but want to pay less. We want more freedom for us, but less freedom for you." What was important was to make bad sound good in a few sentences. Something you could hang your hat on and drape a flag around, throwing God always good, unless it was the wrong God. Joe knew it was time to stand on his head. He needed to look at everything from a different position. Up had to become down, and down up. Everything he thought important was probably least important. What he cared least about had to be pushed to the front of the line. Joe in the lower floor cubicle. Lost in a vast sea of cubicles, overworked, overwhelmed. On his desk were photos of his wife and his kids. The kids would need braces, the kids would need college. Joe studied his pay packet, a stamped-on smiley face, but not enough to break even at the end of the month. The credit card debt kept growing. Joe feared He could not escape, and he feared he would be fired. Competing fears. And after 4 years, he was still a temp worker, no benefits, and it seemed unfair since the temp company occupied the entire first floor and was very, very permanent. Joe feared to question. Beep, beep, toot, toot. Out the window, Times Square lit up. Cup Corp. Ha! We stepped in it, but you wipe it off. On the street was Joe, the subversive pamphleteer, with holes in his shoes and a runny nose. Raw deal. Read all about it. Joe, the beggar on the subway. Someone offered him an apple. Just money, please. He smiled. No teeth. And Joe, the scalper, was selling VIP seats to the revolution. But on the top floor, the holiday music was playing. Christmas in July. Time to get product ready for the market in time for the shopping season. Joe, as usual, looked very busy while he did nothing. He liked to employ tactics to show the value of his time, like the sand clock in 24-minute segments, as if they got a half hour of his time, but got to skip the commercials. This was a man who didn't waste time or sand. And, as Joe liked to say, and such are the days of our lives, baby. Joe's corporate clients liked the theatrics. It had been a lean year, but bookings were way up again. Just like old times, said the minister with a twinkle. And why shouldn't he twinkle? He took 15% right off the top, from this Joe and every Joe. The minister of sinister had all the charm of wart remover cream. But Joe was moved with praise. He was the latest scream, the last word, quite the cheese. Joe, the all right guy, the article, a diamond, a first rate or a peach, a prize, a prince. No slouch, old Joe. Top notch. Good old Joe. Joe had been left alone, and now it was time for him to perform. The minister wanted something whimsical for the man who has everything. And why not? The man who has everything was the only one left with anything. With a display of bombastic nonchalance, Joe said, it could be done. We must all pay the sun-bearer's demand for carrying the celestial disk across the sky. But Joe was drawing a blank. He smacked his head smartly to get the words flowing. But the machine was stuck. It would play a moment and then skip. The digital code was on the fritz. Joe's ones and zeros had been compromised. Someone had plucked out the ones and used them as posts and had been playing horseshoes, tossing the zeros on the pegs, thus static. So instead of work, Joe took pictures. Someone Joe considered to be a great photographer had advised him to always shoot with a purpose. One day shoot clouds, or another day pretend you're a midget shooting up. Joe never liked to miss a sunset. It was important for him to bear witness. Evening came on, the beams of sunset hung their rainbow hues, and Joe was there, clicking away, dark purple at the zenith, and the last light ebbed slowly away. He photographed something different every day. Some days he would think about Bridget Riley and her op art patterns and take pictures of his striped shirts. Some days Joe would shoot patterns, tree barks, and tangled bushes, thinking of Bryce Marden's sinewy, flowing, tangled lines. But mostly, Joe liked taking pictures of his dog. He didn't put his dog in funny dresses, but he took plenty of cheesecake shots. And she was no spring chicken, she was old. Joe dreamed his dog was with him in a tall building, and suddenly his dog jumped out the window. Joe was stunned and horrified, so much so that he woke up. His dog sensed something was wrong, got off her bed on the floor, jumped on his bed, and laid down on top of him. Something she never did. It was so mysterious. On their walk the next morning, he was supposed to be thinking about the next new thing, but he was more interested in his dog. The dream had shaken him. He was very keen about her bowel movements, and things had been a little loose lately because she'd had a steak bone, but that helped with the hot doggy breath. But today was a good day. Not one pooper, but two. All was right with the world. Joe was supposed to be thinking. He was getting paid. The man who has everything doesn't need anything. A box of nothing, thought Joe. A nice box. Keep it on the desk wrapped. Just optimism. No, too abstract. So he communed with his dog. His dog was trying to tell him something. Maybe the bowel movements. Image sent, image received, unless Joe's zeros and ones were still scrambled, but no, he heard wrong. For the plutocrat who has everything, what do you give the man who has everything? A shot of penicillin? The minister, sinister, was not amused. Whimsical was serious business. Joe looked at his dog again. You've got to be kidding. A 22-karat gold dog turd? His dog wagged her tail. Hell yeah, this was worth a puppy biscuit. Well, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. Would Midas have cared if his goose dropped turds instead of eggs? Gold is gold. He could see the prototype. It would look like a sculpture, a small Henry Moore. Just don't say I did it, said his dog. And Joe wouldn't sell it for $105 either. It would go for a lot more, much more. Limited editions, mass-produced, one-of-a-kinds. Cufflinks available also, or wear it instead of a bow tie. Joe expected brisk sales. All he had to do was keep a straight face. Maybe it would work. We shall see. Step aside for the new gods and their minions. The will to survive is what we are geared for. We are the tipping point, the grain of sand that makes the difference. 3 coins in a fountain. Which one will the fountain bless? In the beginning, the world was all before them, where to choose their place of rest, while providence was their guide. They walked hand in hand with wandering steps, and slow through Eden took their solitary way. They went to the fields to take what this sweet hour yields. The gentleness of rain was in the wind. And so it would always be for each new generation, born with their eyes and mouths wide open. Look, see, say. So wrote Joe, the poet of last resort. It all goes so fast, so fast. Circle dance, round and round. The end at the beginning at the end. So goes life. To everything a season, around and round. First there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is. Thank you for everything. I have no complaints whatsoever.